Welcome, everyone. We are here to talk about zero waste and the circular economy and how these principles can help us manage risk and drive innovation. So we're calling this resiliency is the new normal. And so I'll introduce myself first and then hand it over to Behnosh to introduce herself. But my name is Moji. I am the founder of a company called Blue Daisi Consulting, and I offer zero waste consulting for small businesses. So my background is very diverse and nonlinear. I've worked in education for K-12 students, in business operations, in commercial construction as a quality engineer. So I studied mechanical engineering in college. So I have all of these different backgrounds that I like to bring to the zero waste world. And I like to see my role in this movement as three parts. One on an individual level in kind of sharing how to live a zero waste lifestyle as one person and what that could look like. Then working in my company, helping small businesses kind of expand that outward and bring that to a larger scale. And then lastly, I recently joined the board of Zero Waste Washington, where we help advance zero waste policy in the state and beyond. So lots of different angles to attack the zero waste movement on. And I'll pass it over to Behnosh to introduce herself.
Thanks, Moji. Hello, everyone. I've spent the last 10 years working as a design researcher in the local Seattle area, both for public and private institutions. And for those of you not familiar with design research, it's essentially what I'm doing is helping teams design human experiences in interaction with products, but also services. And circular economy was a context I felt very passionate about, and that I felt that I could apply my design thinking skill set and approaches towards. And so I launched Circular by Design as an effort to do that kind of work. And so what I'm doing these days is a variety of things, but they all support businesses' journey towards circular business ventures and also circular business models. So I conduct workshops, educational workshops for the circular economy curious, support businesses in transition to circular business models or ventures, and I do that in a variety of ways. I have various design methodologies and toolkits that I bring into the fold in doing that work, and it's highly collaborative and even fun. And then after that initial engagement, I can help test and validate business concepts with end customers, as well as support the business operations that are necessary to jumpstart those efforts. I'm also a part of an international network of circular economy experts who have all manner of expertise in the area that they bring to the fold, because circular economy is such a interdisciplinary concept. It's very useful to have folks that have expertise in various areas that you can bring on board depending on the problems that you're trying to solve for a particular organization. And so that Circulab International network draws from the same sets of design methodologies and tools as well. And that's something that we share in common as we do this type of work together. Okay, next slide. So in this workshop overview, we only have an hour together, so we're gonna do 4 things. One is just cover really quickly, for those of you not familiar with zero waste and circular economy in general. Moji will do a nice introduction to those 2 areas of expertise, or fields, I should say. And then we will talk about how to build, what resilience is, how to build resilience, and managing risk with zero waste and circular economy principles. And we're gonna ground our understanding in those 2 areas with case studies. And then we'll do a very lightweight workshop exercise to get us started to thinking about how to build in resiliency in our own organizations, drawing from these sets of principles. And then hopefully we'll have 15 or 20 minutes at the end of the workshop for Q&A.
Awesome. So I'll take it from here just to kind of level set. I'm sure if you signed up for this workshop, you have an idea what these two concepts are, but I just want to get us all on the same page in case you have never heard of these terms before. And so we're going to talk about what are zero waste and the circular economy. And so what these things are the opposite, or where we're going, of what we're doing now. So the linear economy is how we can describe our current economy. And an easy way to remember this is with 3 words: take, make, and waste. And so what that looks like is we take materials out of the ground, either through mining or harvesting natural resources. We make them into the goods and products that we buy and sell, that we use in our everyday life. And then at the end of their life, when we're done using them, or they're out of trend, or they break, we send them to the landfill as waste. And so this is an issue because we get situations that look like this. This is a picture of a typical landfill where we have all of these really great materials that we throw into these holes in the ground to sit till the end of time. And so there's some technology that's really clever in harvesting things like methane gases from landfill, but the point of the zero waste movement and circular economy is to eliminate the need for landfills in the first place, so that it's the last resort for where we're sending our materials. And so we want to go from a linear economy where we're just sending things to the trash, into the garbage, transition through a recycling economy, which we are experiencing with certain materials at this point. I know we recycle paper and cardboard and metals in our recycling bins and on the curb, but that's still very rudimentary compared to where the circular economy wants to take us, where we are completely eliminating the need for trash and designing out waste overall. And so that's the dream, that's the goal, is no trash. And so there are 3 principles of the circular economy. These are as defined by the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, which is one of the leading organizations for circular economy in the globe. And so they have this really straightforward principles that they use, which are first, designing out waste and pollution from the very beginning. So when we create a new product or good or even a service, we design it with waste being not included in that process. We have keeping products and materials in use for as long as possible and as efficiently as possible. And then lastly, regenerating natural systems. So it's not just about recycling over and over again and doing our best at that, but it's also how can we move away from just extracting from the earth and being so one-sided with the relationship, and being regenerative and being in a reciprocal relationship with the planet. And so I want to give 3 very brief, very basic examples before we dive into our more detailed case studies. But if you're new to the zero waste or circular economy world, a very easy way to wrap your head around this is the way that the Milkman used to work. That was before I was born, so I never experienced this in real life. But decades ago, when we had the Milkman or Milkwoman, they would bring your dairy products in glass bottles. They would leave them outside your door. You'd consume the milk, drink it, put it in your baked goods, whatever you would do with it. And then you'd put those glass bottles back outside your door for the milk person to pick them up again. And so those glass bottles create this endless loop, unless the product breaks, but an essentially endless loop of glass never going to the landfill. And so that's basically what the circular economy is working towards. I have 2 more examples for you. This is the coffee cherry company that is actually local to here in the Seattle area. I found just recently, and I thought it was so interesting that I'm not a big coffee drinker, but I know that the bean is the most valuable part of the coffee plant. They take that green part in the picture there, and you roast it to whatever your liking is, and then you brew it and you have your delicious coffee. But what happens to the outer part, the coffee cherry, is it's just discarded as waste. And so we have this amazing plant that puts so much energy into creating the coffee cherry and the bean, and we only use one part. So the coffee cherry company created this really great process to dry out that cherry, make it into a powder so that it can be used in baked goods. So you get that coffee taste without wasting the coffee cherry. So that's another example of what the circular economy can look like, designing out waste. And lastly, another semi-local example, they have offices here in Seattle as well, but this is Girlfriend Collective. They're an activewear brand where they sell leggings and tank tops and socks and other kinds of athleisure wear. It's really cute. But what they did is they solved two problems of waste here. One is that most athletic wear is made out of polyester, which is actually just plastic. It's derived from fossil fuels. And so they thought, why not, instead of using virgin fossil fuels and further contributing to the fossil fuel industry, let's use recycled plastic bottles to make the fibers. So it's still plastic, but it's made from a recycled source. And they took it one step further and they created this system called Girlfriend. And so the clothing is designed specifically so that when you're done with your leisure wear, if you put a hole in it, you no longer like it, whatever your reason is for getting rid of it, you can actually send it back to the brand. They will shred it up with their innovative technology, separate out those polyester fibers, respin them into new fibers and create new athletic wear. So they've created this closed loop system into their business model where waste is completely designed out. So if you're into that kind of thing, I would highly recommend checking out Girlfriend Collective. And so I'll end with this. This is a butterfly diagram of the circular economy. I'm not going to go into detail with every single part of it because I assume we are at least a little bit familiar, but I want to call out three things in this diagram. The first are the two different sides. So we see on the left, there are a bunch of green arrows. Those represent biological material flows. So anything that nature can naturally do or can happen with biological processes, that's represented on the left side. So think like composting is a biological process. On the right side with the blue circular flows, those are technological flows, and those are things that can't happen in nature. So think recycling. And so we have these two different material flows that materials can possibly go on. And then another thing to notice is how large those loops are. So the larger the loop, the more energy it takes to make that process happen. So if we think about, for example, recycling an aluminum can after you drink your sparkling water or whatever you like to enjoy, recycling is actually the most energy, or it takes the most energy as a process as opposed to reusing that same can. And so what we want to do with the circular economy is create these loops and make them as small as we possibly can. And then the last piece I want to call it is at the very top, there's a little lightning bolt. That is showing that this whole material flow structure is made on the foundation of the transition to renewable energy. So we want to move away from our extractive fossil fuel economy and invest in renewables so that all of this happens on a renewable grid. And so that is a very condensed way of explaining the circular economy, but I just wanted to make sure we have a very basic understanding of what we're talking about. And I'm going to pass it over to Behnosh to give us how this can create resilience in our businesses.
Thanks, Moji, for that excellent summary. But before we start talking about resiliency, I want to understand how you all think about resiliency, in particular for your businesses or your organizations. And then if you like, you can think about the challenges and needs in this area. And I want to take just a minute or two to pause and kind of reflect on that question. And then when we come back together as a group, I want to hear from some of you in relation to this question. So let's pause here for a minute or two, and then we'll just do it popcorn style and share out. All right. Does anybody want to comment on this question? How are you all thinking about resiliency in your organizations, or why, or challenges or needs in this area? Or are any of you even thinking about resiliency at all? Maybe it's just a topic that's kind of that you're curious about.
Hi, my name is Maria Batiola, and I chair Beacon Hill Council. So we're not a business, but we're about advocating for a welcoming, diverse, and healthy community. We're 72% people of color, 44% immigrants and refugees. And it feels like there's a lot of onslaught from the good things supposedly that are being changed for climate, but it's impacting us in tough ways. So I wanted to really learn what your model is so that we can integrate it. So for example, we got a small planning grant for a grocery store that we want to bring the vision for Red Apple to the owners, to the landowners, so that it can be an integrated housing, low cost housing, low cost cultural space, low cost business space, and just wanted to see how I can weave in some of what you're talking about. But definitely, we want a clean environment. We are a aircraft, big time aircraft polluted and road pollution space. Thank you for asking.
Thanks for sharing that with me, Maria. I've actually heard a lot about your work and have been tracking it. So I appreciate all that you're doing for the Beacon Hill community there. Anybody else want to share how they're thinking about resiliency?
Yeah, I don't know how to share my camera, but
oh, I see you.
You
You're in a beautiful location, yes.
So I'm Jalen. My company, I have an e-commerce business, Piece General Store, and then I have an accessories brand, Copper Piece Co. And for a while, I've wanted to move away from using leather, but I haven't been able to find an alternative that I could deem lasting as long as the products I make, which is really important to the brand, is to create heirloom accessories. And so recently, very exciting, there's a company called Myco Works out of San Francisco that is making a mycelium woven mushroom leather. And they've already partnered with luxury brands like Hermes, and they're creating a really durable, sustainable alternative to leather. So that's one way that we're trying to partner up and start transitioning to this new material. And I mean, gosh, I think over the next 5 years, like I would love to be completely like sustainable in all of our practices, but it's a slow process and I think it takes little steps. So just even transitioning all of our packaging now to, we use eco-enclosed, and we now have all recycled and recyclable packaging. I just designed our new tags, and they're not paper, they're actually badges, and the front has the brand, but the back is like a bunch of inspiration. And so they're fabric tags that the customer can keep and hang, and it says like dream, inspire, create, kind of like in sync with our customers' musicianship, to play music. And so it's just like all this fun stuff that like I hope people will keep the fabric tag and hang it up on their bulletin board or by their desk or wherever, you know, they might want a little boost of inspiration. So that's kind of another way.
Thanks for sharing, Jalen. It's always interesting to hear how people are engaging with these concepts. I'm gonna stop our conversation there in hopes that at the tail end in the Q&A, we can start talking about some of your specific issues or concerns in the realm of resiliency. But I want to make sure that we are able to cover the content that we want to share with you today for right now. Moji, can you advance to the next slide? Thank you so much. Okay, so I want to ground this conversation about resiliency into something that we can all relate to, which is the COVID pandemic, right? We're still in the middle of it. And experiencing it on many different levels. And I want to talk about it, first of all, and foremost, in the context of supply chains, which if any of you use materials or source materials, this is very relevant for you. And early on in the COVID pandemic, we heard a lot about the precariousness of our supply chains, especially in relation to the personal protective equipment that hospitals did not have. And there was a lot of analysis and questions about why can't we get these really important products made, and analysis around it. And this article here is from the Harvard Business Journal talking about the need for more resilient supply chains. And there were a number of reasons why that happened, right? So One was that people suddenly discovered that their supply chains were invisible to a certain extent. Perhaps they knew their first tier supplier, but they had no idea who second or third tier suppliers were. They were sourcing all of their equipment or materials from one location, or like an area was just completely quarantined off. And then there was no way to produce or manufacture goods in that area. So many different things contributed to this crisis, but we started to feel like, wow, this is something that we need to track as a business. Next slide, please. Thanks. And the other thing that was happening, and that's continuing to happen, is that businesses are having to redefine their value proposition and pivot in a number of different ways. So we did this all on many different, businesses did this all on many different levels. Most notably was Canlis, which is a fine dining restaurant here in the Seattle area. Many articles were written up about how many times they pivoted first from a burger joint to a home delivery service to bagels to a drive-in to drive-in theater. And I think they launched a community college. So they were they used this opportunity to like create a lot of different offerings in order to stay afloat. And we saw that everywhere, right? We saw people creating opportunities to innovating and really collaborating in order to get through this really difficult time for many people. And what came out of that were, random acts of kindness on an individual level, but also partnerships and communities between businesses that helped one another. And this example was this picture that I have here was a very famous example in the news where doctors were starting to use scuba diving masks as respirators or for their patients that were suffering from COVID. Next slide. And so looking down the pipeline, looking into the future, we see that COVID-19 actually is just but one of many anticipated shocks and waves that we're going to experience as our world is increasingly complex and interconnected, and many of our challenges are systemic. We will have to demonstrate this same kind of resiliency, not just now, but many, many years in the future. And we can't keep this myopic view that's kind of illustrated in this cartoon here, which I love, which is like, let's just keep our masks on and everything's going to be okay in light of this. Like, what we want to do is prepare. We want to be resilient. We want to use this time to build opportunities for ourselves and help support one another. Yeah, and I want to end it on the conversation on a positive note by saying we are all in this together, that we're not only experiencing this pandemic and future pandemics, most likely in our businesses, but we're experiencing them in our communities. We're experiencing them as individuals. So we're hoping, Moji and I, that sharing these strategies with you will help you start to think about how you can become resilient in all those areas of your life, but particularly with a focus on your business or your organization. And now what I'm going to do is pass it over back to Moji, and she's going to start walking you through a set of circular economy and zero waste principles that we'll quickly review, and then we will do a little workshop exercise with. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to you, Moji.
That was awesome, Behnosh. So I'm going to walk us through 9 different strategies. And I want to preface this before I jump into these examples that we're not trying to do all of these things. And these are also just basic examples of each of these principles, just so that we understand what they are. So we can have conversations all day about this in more depth, but I just want to give us a very brief overview with the limited time that we have. And then lastly, I'll say that all of these are diverse examples of not only products that are showing the circular economy, but also business models and even community structures. So we're thinking about this not just from a sustainability in terms of the environment perspective, but also social and economic justices. So prefacing all of that with that. So the first principle I want to share, or the first strategy, is minimizing raw material use. And so for each of these strategies, I've attached an example. Typically, they're local to Seattle, just to show you what this looks like in practice. And so here's an example of free lard tamales. I love these tamales. I order them at least once a quarter, just a big batch of them. But they make these amazing handmade tamales that are always different flavors: pork, vegan, chicken, beef, anything you can think of. And tamales are actually zero waste inherently. They are the food, the masa is put into these corn husks. And what they were noticing is that they were packaging these corn husks that were already kind of packaged in the first place into another package. I think they were compostable boxes. And they realized that if all they did was figure out a way to minimize their raw material use by creating this twine system to label all of their tamales, they eliminate the need for packaging. So now all of their tamales have these colored twines that they use to tie the ends that tell you whether it's a pork tamale, a chicken tamale, and it just eliminates the need for packaging. And so they created this very clever way of reducing packaging waste. Another strategy is decoupling business growth from the use of virgin materials. So is there a way that we can grow our businesses, grow our economy, continue to make revenue in a way that's constantly increasing without continuously extracting from the earth? And so one very simple example is Armoire, which is a clothing rental company based here in Seattle. And they sell really beautiful high-end clothes to working women or people who enjoy renting from them. And they are able to create this sharing economy where you're able to rent clothes for when you need them, send them back if you don't need them, and you're no longer creating waste by buying and making new things. So there's another example of this strategy. Third, optimizing what's already in use or available through reuse, remanufacturing, or upcycling. And so what this could look like is Refugee Artisan Initiative, or RAI, also based here in the Seattle area. And what they did is after the whole craze at the inauguration of the Bernie mittens that were made out of, I think, recycled fleece and other materials, they made their own version. And so they take in all kinds of extra fabrics, whether it's bed sheets, which they turn into scrubs, or things like fleece sweaters, which they turned into these gloves. And I actually purchased a pair and they are so cozy. So highly recommend checking them out. Fourth, I have, this is a map I stole from the Fremont Brewing website. And so localizing supply chains is another really clever way to increase resilience. We decrease the amount of space things can travel. So Behnosh was talking about how during COVID, supply chains were interrupted. We didn't know what was coming from where. Things are coming from so far. We had the Suez Canal the other day. So lots of things can interrupt the way that we get our materials. And so making things less than a few hours away, they get their hops, their grains, and their water all within maybe a 3-hour drive from the Seattle area. And so creating these local tight supply chains can help build resilience in our business. Knowledge sharing, encouraging interaction and partnerships between stakeholders. So I love this one because it takes us beyond just the material part of the circular economy, but really brings it out to the community aspect of things. And so this example is Nurturing Roots. It's an urban farm that has a location down in Beacon Hill. And so Naima, the founder, not only grows veggies that she sells for free or low cost in the local neighborhood, but also makes it an educational opportunity. So you see her in this picture with some young kids, teaching them how to play with the dirt and make things grow. The other day, they were building a greenhouse and they were able to recruit local high schoolers to create jobs. So they pay these high schoolers to learn how to build a greenhouse. They're learning construction skills, they're learning teamwork and project management, and all of these great tangible skills, while also just being a farm. So taking that very basic business model and expanding it out into the community. Behnosh mentioned this earlier, but diversification. So Canlis has been a really shining example in the Seattle area for really diversifying their product offerings, the way that they do business to adapt with the times. And so she mentioned they were a drive-in movie theater. They've increased takeout. They added this Camp Canlis now this spring where you can rent a treehouse or a yurt. And when I moved to Seattle 3 years ago, I thought Canlis was a place that you go for weddings or very fancy events. And I would never imagine myself going to Camp Canlis. And so it's bred innovation and gone in a direction that you never would have thought. They've also created a community college and they're doing live music streaming. There are so many different things that they're doing. And so they're not just sticking to their very rigid fine dining business model. We've got 3 more examples, and then we'll talk about this in a minute. Redundancy. So this one was a little tricky for me to show because when I think of redundancy in a circular economy aspect, I think about technology a little bit. I think about ways to make technology a little more making sure that if something were to break, there's also a backup system involved. That's what it is by nature. But I wanted to bring in a more social justice community aspect to redundancy. And so this is Escalita's Library. They are a justice-focused community bookstore and library based in North Beacon Hill. And the redundancy piece in this business model is not only are they a bookstore, so you can buy their books online if you just Google their name, they're also a library, so you can get those books for free. And in addition, they have all kinds of community events and resources to educate people. So the goal of the business is to educate people about justice and whatever else that they're passionate about, but they have so many different models to make sure that that happens in a way that's cost effective for different income levels or different ways of accessibility. So the essential business function still gets completed, but there are different modes of having that being able to be accomplished. Clean energy, this is one that I mentioned that's the foundation of the circular economy. Instead of giving you, telling you all to get solar panels or wind power or whatnot, which I know would be the dream, I know that that's not accessible for most small business owners. So I wanted to share this program at Seattle City Light where you can green up is what they call it. And you can buy reusable energy credits and add them onto your light bill. So I think it's $6 to $10 a month extra. You can help the city invest in renewable energy. So you're not buying all the infrastructure. You don't have to go out and buy a solar panel unless you want to, that's great. But you can just add a few dollars to your bill and help support that clean energy transition. So that's another way that you can make that happen for you. And then my last one, this is probably my favorite, most recent example, is the new Starbucks pilot going on in West Seattle, where they are creating a closed loop system with their takeout cups. So if you are a coffee lover, you love Starbucks, instead of buying your individual takeout cup and throwing it in the trash, they're creating this reusable system where you can use their cups, put it back in a kiosk, and they will sanitize it, recirculate it, and you're no longer using these single-use cups. And so the think systematically part of this is that Starbucks did not do this alone. They actually enlisted the help of 2 small startups and businesses here in the Seattle area, and that's GoBox and Ridley. And so in order for the system to work, Starbucks did not have everything that they needed to make that happen in-house. And they definitely won't be able to do that large scale. They'll need the support of other systems. And so GoBox, they create the systems to reuse and sanitize these containers. And then Ridley has another mode where they collect things like plastic film, textiles. I'm sure many of you have heard of it, but they are bringing these systems together to create a very seamless system so that no matter how you interact with this product, there's a very easy way for you to return it and create these circles. So with that, I'm just going to leave the list of all 9 of those things up, give you a second to digest, and then we're going to go through some workshop exercises with Behnosh she's going to lead about how to bring this into our business. So I'm going to leave this up so you can marinate that on for a minute.
Moji, I love that last example. Also as illustration of partnerships, like you find that when you start to incorporate more circular economy and zero waste strategies in your business model, that partnerships are necessary and sharing expertise is necessary as well. So just wanted to add that in there. Okay, let's go to the next slide. So what I want to do is just take a few minutes now to help you think about these strategies in relation to your own business or organization. Take one or two of those strategies and just apply them to your own business. Think about how you might adapt or shift your business in a very small way along the lines of these principles, and then we can share with one another. Let's take a minute to do that. All right. Who wants to share first? Don't all come clamoring at once. Does anybody have ideas, or was anybody inspired by anything that they saw just now in terms of how to kind of shift or implement in their own organizations? Allison, I see that you raised your hand. Thanks for sharing.
So I actually run a couple different businesses, so it's always interesting to see how this sort of plays into each different one. But one of the things that I've been trying to do over the last few years is to really not purchase new business supplies. So here in Tacoma, we have a place called Tinkertopia. And a couple of years ago, they had brand new bubble envelopes that had been given to them. And I bought out like the entire stuff. Like I didn't need, 300 envelopes, but I bought all of them so that I didn't need to buy envelopes for my business for like 2 or 3 full years. And they're just, some of them are still in my basement, but to me, it just made so much sense to buy them. They were, cheaper than buying new, but they were brand new and they were great. And so it's kind of to me, like a constant struggle to like think about the different things that you utilize in your business and how can you replace each of them, either with something that's used already or something that's more eco-friendly. And so here in Tacoma, there's a new store called Tacoma that you can actually become a member. Membership is really inexpensive. And then they have a free store for business materials, like boxes and bubble packs and even like office supplies and decor and things like that. And so I am on the organizing committee for that. I'm not like I'm just sort of helping with it, but the people who are running it are really amazing. And they have, like the other day they had 30 like thermal paper rolls for like cashiers. And then like the next day they had 200 soap molds. So it's really cool to see what's coming in and what's being donated. And it's given me a lot to think about of like, oh, I didn't even think about that one thing that I'm using that could actually be replaced. So like I have a service-based business and that's kind of where more like the office supplies come in. But then I also make jewelry, and it's a constant battle there. Like the other person was saying about materials and finding materials that are eco-friendly and not sort of using a lot of extractive resources. So that's kind of, this is something that's kind of always on my mind. And I feel like it's always, I said struggle, but it's more like it's always just like a journey of like, just how many more things can you like take out of the consumer stream? Like how can you stop participating in those consumer streams and participate in the circular economy? So that's kind of where I am. I'm always thinking about it, but there's always more to do.
Thank you. I'm sure other people would love to see a link to that Tacoma organization. That would be awesome. Anybody else want to share? Elizabeth.
Hi, everyone.
Hi.
I really love the example of the Starbucks partnership with Ridwell, and I can't recall the third company there, but we've been trying to do something similar for our products. We'd love to be able to offer refills instead of just continuously having customers buy the new glass bottles, even though glass bottles are reusable and recyclable. We'd love to find a way to refill those bottles, or at the very least have customers hang on to those bottles, and we could ship a sort of a revolving package, like another container that they can refill their bottles with, and then send that back to us somehow. So being able to collect those refill containers and sterilize them and refill them and put them back into circulation would be amazing. We just, we don't have the resources Starbucks does to create those types of partnerships. I mean, we use Ridwell here personally, but it just seems a little prohibitive for where we're at currently with our business finances to create some, a partnership of that magnitude, I think.
Well, there are smaller partnerships to be had as well. I mean, it just depends on, the problem space exactly. I'd have to hear more details, but oftentimes partnerships have a win-win kind of scenario associated with them. So if you can build out an offering that helps you, but also helps additional partners, with, of course, terms and agreements for how to engage, it can actually be pretty straightforward. But we can talk more about that later, Elizabeth. Anyone else want to share? Take one more. Okay. Was there anything particularly inspirational or something that you think you might be able to run with, but not quite sure yet?
This is Kamal.
Hey, Kamal.
Hey, thanks for doing this. Love seeing this stuff. Yeah, I just wanted to mention on number 9, think systemically, and the relationships that have been built with a large local company and 2 small local companies. I mean, GoBox is from Portland, but they've been here for a long time. I would love to see more of those relationships being built. Just like, how do we fund those relationships and those, because we have to move beyond sort of funding one company, but funding like a network of companies.
Absolutely.
So just wanted to add that.
Yeah, I agree. And there's ways that we can walk through, exercises to help identify the right partnerships for the right offering or the right problem to be solved. So we can start now with actually a tool that I want to share with you all. I'm going to actually send this tool to each of you because I have your email addresses to play around with after today. This is kind of like a guided exercise. It's a self-guided exercise, really. It can be, but I'm happy to answer any additional follow-up questions or facilitate a discussion around this for internal groups or teams. But essentially, what I want to share with you is this business canvas. And it's different from a traditional visual business canvas that many of you may have used before in the past or have seen. And for those that that haven't at all, a business canvas is usually like a bird's eye view of a business plan. It's a way to jumpstart your thinking about, okay, what are the different things that I need to put together to help me accomplish the goal that I want to set out in front of myself. And so in the context of this conversation, we can talk about your goal being one of becoming more resilient, right? And maybe in a particular area that you have in mind, or managing your risk for your business in a particular area. Some businesses more than others have awareness and are kind of forecasting into the future about like, what are the things that we see coming down the line that are going to present themselves at risks. And Circular by Design can also help with that type of work. But in the context of this business canvas, we can structure the conversation in a way that helps us guide our thinking and start to put pieces in place that are necessary to enact that kind of transition or change. Next slide, please. I just want to walk you through each of the different elements of this. Here we go. So again, we start with a mission. And typically for a business canvas, you would put the mission of the company, right? But in the context of this a more specific exercise you could do with the canvas in relation to resiliency, you can list out your goals here. And then each of the subsequent boxes that you see here, you would want to connect them back to that mission statement. That's an important part of the process, so you don't lose sight of what you're trying to accomplish. Next slide, please. So in these next two boxes, you want to identify the key activities that you're trying to create, and then think about what kinds of expertise you'll need in place, what kinds of expertise you have and what kinds of expertise you'll need to acquire to help initiate those activities. And then you can start thinking about your partnerships. Who are going to be the key partnerships that you're going to want to engage to create whatever kind of value or product or service that ties back to that goal or objective. Next slide, please. Oh, sorry. So the circular canvas business canvas is a little different from traditional business canvases because there are these additional boxes, including listing out what kinds of resources you need to help guide your effort. So we want to definitely list the natural resources that we are going to use, whether they're upcycled or virgin materials, anything along those lines. The technical resources in terms of equipment, computers, things like that, and then the energy resources. Next slide, please. And then you want to clearly state your value proposition, like what needs are you trying to solve for your customers or your constituents, and then who are your users and your target audiences or your customers, and in what context will they be using your product or your service. Next slide, please. And then, in terms of distribution, you can think about, the actual travel and logistics necessary to ship things. But in this context, you can also think about marketing efforts, how you get your message across, what channels are you going to be selling through, that sort of thing. And then the next box is what is the next use? Sorry. Actually go back a slide. So what is the next use in relation to this upcycling box for that whatever materials that you have accumulated at this point in your offering? You want to be thinking about where is that going, and list that out there. Next slide, please. Thanks. And then for each of these columns that are coded by color, what you want to do is list the positive and the negative externalities. So this is something that a traditional business canvas will not do, but the circular business canvas really ensures that we are keeping track of what we are doing in a positive way, because we want to support those efforts, and also in a negative way, because we want to minimize whatever we're doing in terms of our negative externalities, whether they be material or environmental in nature or social. Next slide, please. And then there are the revenues and costs associated with each of those categories. That you would do the same thing. You would use the same process. You would go by color categories, listing out the revenues and costs for each of those. There was one more thing I wanted to say about this canvas, and it's going to come back to me in just a second. But essentially, doing that exercise, this is what I wanted to say. What you could do, a really interesting and neat way to use this canvas is to first summarize business as usual, like right now, what's happening in your environment, and fill this out. And then you can start threading in those different principles, resiliency principles, and see how the revenue streams and the costs change, and the positive and the negative impacts change. And you can use that as a way to make decisions or to talk to decision makers in your organization. Next slide. All right, I think we've reached the end of our presentation and are happy to take questions and comments in relation to anything that we just discussed. And I know there was one person, Maria, I think wanted to see the comic that we presented, Moji. I'm wondering if you could go back to that for just a second. Maria, you can actually look this comic up online. It's pretty widely printed. And if you look up the artist's name, and I forget it, but it's listed on the picture.
I think it's McKay.
Okay, great.
But
Yes.
thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay.
So, so we partner with El Centro de la Raza, and our call is, the work we do is environmental justice, health justice, and climate justice. So that cartoon just really brings it home. And what we're trying to do is advocating for whatever recovery dollars in COVID needs to be applied for all three. So I was just so delighted to see that in your thinking. Thank you.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And Maria, I'm going to add to the chat. You said you worked on the South End in Beacon Hill. Is that what? Yeah. So I actually have a free program in partnership with SPU. It's called the Zero Waste Small Business Program, and it's free for any small business to join. And we're actually starting next week on Tuesday, a new cohort. So I will share the link in the chat so that you can share with anyone who might need that.
That's great, Moji.
Yeah, what I'm actually thinking is maybe getting a small grant going so that you guys can come, and we at Beacon Hill Council can partner with Beacon Business Alliance, because we have a lot of small businesses and your ideas hit home. It may not be as dramatic, but there'll be something there.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is a very low commitment. It's 3 hours max, just to kind of give people a basic understanding. So this in a little bit bigger form.
Love it.
Awesome. Any other questions?
Nico, were there some questions from the audience that we wanted to tackle?
Yes, I was just about to bring those up. So we did have a few submitted through registration. And you kind of touched on this in your presentation, but perhaps calling out more specifically how we can detach from capitalism in our businesses while still surviving as a business.
Do you want me to start, Behnosh?
Sure.
Sure, yeah.
Good question, yeah.
Yeah, so I think that the one easy answer, I know it's not an easy thing to talk about, but the easiest answer I can think of to say in a short amount of time is that capitalism by nature is extractive. So under the system of capitalism, we're assuming that there will always be more, that we can always just take, and have exponential growth, and nothing will hinder that. And so pursuing zero waste and the circular economy challenges that and pushes back and says, how can we take less? How can we be in a more reciprocal relationship with our communities, with nature? And so that's one way, is to shift our thinking away from just take. And how can we create these loops, not only with materials, but with money, with finances, with other resources? So yeah, shifting our thinking can be one step.
I love that answer too, Moji. And I will add to it and say that, you know, a circular economy is still an economy, and we're still creating value, but we're trying to create different kinds of value, or multiple kinds of value, I should say. So we still want to create economic value. People still need revenue to live and survive, but we also want to create social value and social value, as well as environmental value. So we're thinking about those three pillars in terms of how to create value in these new systems and new economies.
Any other questions?
Just have a few minutes left, so want to check and see if anyone present currently has any additional questions. If not, I can ask, I think, one more from our submissions.
While we pause for that, I'm going to drop one more link. It's on the slide, but it's to a free guide that I've created. If you or anyone you know is just getting started in the zero waste world and needs a little bit of help just understanding the concepts, I have a guide which includes a roadmap to zero waste. So very beginner's guide, but kind of getting the gears turning in that area.
Thank you, Moji. And one quick bit of info from Maria. Is that okay if I share that out with the group? I think that's exciting news. Yeah. Sorry, I'm just trying to copy paste so everyone can read it word for word. Was that all right, Maria, if I send it out?
Yes.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's exciting news.
There's also a question about how to jumpstart these efforts within your organization that I thought was interesting and perhaps relevant to everybody on the call. But I want to open that conversation up to Moji first, because she's working with a lot of small business organizations right now, and I'm sure her comments will be more salient. And then I can add, as Moji, is it okay if I put you on the spot?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll be brief. I know we have just 1 minute left, so I'll be very brief. But it's, of course, not an easy thing to figure out. If we could figure it out easily, it would be done by now. But the best advice that I give to clients who may not be either the decision maker and might be lower down in their company or need other stakeholders to get involved is to translate the circular economy and zero waste into what matters for whoever those decision makers are. So if they really care about finances, figure out a way to prove to them the financial efficacy of what you're trying to prove. If they care about connecting it to employee wellness or other like kind of employee initiatives, see how you can connect these things to that. So it's just translating these words into a language that they can understand.
And that's exactly what I was going to say. Understanding what your leadership and your decision makers care about and translating these concepts into that and building a business case around it is really important.
Awesome. Well, what a great note to end us on. Thank you so much, Moji and Behnosh, for the information. And it sounds like there are many connections to be had amongst this group. And so we'll be following up with the recording, the presentation, and both of their contact information for folks to be able to reach out if you have any other questions. But thank you all so much for coming today. And we'll also be following up with more information about Seattle Good Business Network if you're interested in learning more about our programs. But yeah, thank you all so much.
Thanks so much, Nico, for having us, and everyone for attending the call. Thanks.
Enjoy the day.
Bye.
Thank you.